Worth.
Deputy Speaker, in Australia we believe that each generation should leave the next generation better off. I think this is something deeply, deeply held, and as a parent, one that I hold in particular. But I spoke recently to a young man in my electorate, a young man called Hugo, and he highlighted to me that the feeling is at the moment in young people that that is just not happening. He said, "I feel like I've done everything right. I worked hard at school, worked hard at uni, I've got a good degree and a well-paying job. But right now I'm saddled with $50,000 worth of HECS debt, and I don't believe I'll ever be able to afford my own home." Recent conversations with people like Hugo have made me question whether Australia is on the right track in terms of making sure each generation is better off than the previous generation, and I don't believe that we are. This bill that is in front of the House will make some small steps to rebalancing these challenges, but there is so much more to do. The bill introduces a number of changes proposed by the University Accord, and in particular it will introduce changes to the HELP indexation scheme to make study more affordable. It will also change funding arrangements for practical placements, in acknowledgement that not all Australians are in positions to take unpaid work. I'm really proud that this bill is here in front of the House, and I'm really proud the role that I have played and many on the crossbench have played to get here. Over a year ago, myself and others went to the Education Minister and really highlighted the deep concerns that we had for young people about the indexation of the HELP of the HECS debt. There were, I spoke to many young people in my electorate, but also including members of my team, who were talking about how difficult it was, watching their HECS debt go up by 7% a year, because of the high inflation, when this was meant to be an interest-free loan. And actually, the rate that they were paying was significantly higher than the mortgage rates or loan rates that were being offered by the banks. It felt so terribly unfair at a time where young people are struggling with higher education costs than previous generations, and so difficulty with rent and difficulty, with this prospect of being able to really stand on their own 2 feet and eventually also own a home themselves. We wrote to the minister. We spoke to. We raised these issues with him repeatedly. We asked him questions in question time. A colleague of mine, Monique Ryan, put forward a survey, a petition on this topic, which got, I think, hundreds of thousands of support, because it wasn't just the students concerned about this. It's their parents, grandparents and the whole community. A real sense that the community is concerned, that young people are falling behind, and it is up to us in this parliament to do something about it. So I am very pleased that the government eventually committed to these changes and has finally introduced this bill to parliament. But I want to acknowledge, as we go through the detail, that there is much more to be done. I will continue to pressure the government to change the date of HECS indexation to account for the compulsory payments that go through the year, to update the prudential guidance for the treatment of HECS by banks, and to remove the highly problematic job-ready graduate schemes introduced by the former coalition government. I will also continue to advocate measures that ensure that universities remain a safe and inclusive place for all. Deputy Speaker, Australia has a proud history of educational equity. While university is not free, initiatives such as HELP scheme and caps on course fees for domestic students enable relatively equitable educational attainment, certainly compared to some of our peers. We also have a high-quality education system that blends theory and practice. In many degrees, this involves integrated work placements that ensure that our graduates obtain the skills they need to excel in the jobs of their chosen field. This is because we recognise the importance of a good quality education in our evolving workplace. Jobs and Skills Australia expect that the share of new jobs requiring further education beyond high school to increase from 70% to 90% over the next decade. And we also recognise the role that education plays in access to social mobility and greater opportunity for all. But affordability of education is becoming a barrier. The HELP scheme is a critical part of our education system, and it's not perfect by any means, and many of the 3 million Australians with a HELP debt still face a number of financial barriers. It's not just a deterrent for those deciding whether or not to undertake further studies at the completion of their schooling. It's also that people for whom cost is a determining factor against further postgraduate study or upskilling or reskilling as mature age students. Either way, the impact of debt on decision-making limits individual economy-wide workforce potential and contributes to skill shortages of the future. The average time to pay down a help debt now is 10 years, and the existence of this debt has implications for access to other credit, in particular mortgages. Home ownership among young people is plummeting, mostly as a result of inadequate supply, but that has been driving costs up. That has been driving the prices up. But it's also because students are going to university, accruing student debt, as well as setting back the timing for them of joining the labour force and buying a home. Home ownership for those aged 25 to 34 has declined approximately 20% in 40 years. I want to take a pause here because I think we need to recognise why there is so much angst and concern, amongst younger generations, but also, frankly, the whole community about younger generations. The point is that this community, this generation of younger people, finishing school, going to university, going to work, they're the most educated young people we've ever had. They have put more into their studies, more into being ready for work than any generation that we've had before. But at the same time, they are less likely to reach the goals in terms of things like home ownership than previous generations have. So they've got this effort in and they are not getting the reward out. And this is the fundamental imbalance that we have right now. And this is what we in this parliament need to address and need to address urgently. The system, again, this comes back to why this bill is important, but why this bill is only a small part. The helper indexation model worked reasonably well if you had a low inflation environment. But when you have a high inflation environment with inflation at 7.1% as it was, newly graduated Australians had their help debt increase by thousands of dollars, quite literally, overnight. And it increases both the financial strain on graduates, but also has the impact of deterring others from pursuing higher education altogether. The changes to the help indexation, which tie indexation to the lower of either the consumer price index or the wage price index, will provide protections to students that, in times like these, their debt will not increase above their wages. And I think this is absolutely critical. And I do want to just acknowledge also the Youth Action Committee in my community of Wentworth. So previously, we asked Wentworth if there were young people out there who wanted to join a Youth Action Committee, and we have been overwhelmed by response, and I've been overwhelmed by the strength of that Youth Action Committee. And one of the issues that my committee wants to focus on and is focusing on right now is about financial literacy for young people, and particularly around help or HECS debt, because they recognise that so many people go into university without actually understanding what they're signing themselves up to. And this is of huge concern, I think, for young people as they move further through their university education. So I just wanted to say congratulations to the Youth Action Committee on the work that you're doing. It is really important, and I'm very proud that you are also advocating for this legislation, for the reduction, for the changing of the indexation of help desk, and I'm very proud to be able to stand up and support it today. And now I'd like to move on to practical placements. Prac placements are an integral part of many academic programs, providing students with invaluable real-world experience. However, the requirement to undertake unpaid placements often presents a significant barrier for students, particularly those from low socio-economic backgrounds or those who might not have the supports of being able to live at home. Professions that rely on most on unpaid prac placements are also in the care and teaching sectors that have a disproportionate number of female enrolments. Students shouldn't have to choose between gaining essential experience and meeting their basic living expenses. This bill will ensure that all students, regardless of their financial situation, can benefit from the same opportunities to gain practical experience. This is not just about supporting individual students, it's also about ensuring that our future workforce is diverse, skilled, and capable of contributing fully to our economy and society. For the same reason, I support the intention of this bill to fund more enabling courses that help people prepare for undergraduate studies. These courses particularly support those from disadvantaged backgrounds or mature-age students for whom there are greater barriers for obtaining a university degree. While I support this measure, analysis by Andrew Norton highlights that during a fixed funding cluster will impact different disciplines differently, with degrees such as science taking a substantial hit under the proposed system. This will require monitoring, since a policy will rely on universities to cross-subsidise these courses to avoid having the opposite effect of fewer places in certain fields. While the measures introduced under this bill represent progress, there are still significant bugs in our education system that work against the outcomes we seek of equity, fairness and even safety. Firstly, we need to have a smarter system that accounts for the pay-as-you-go contributions people make to their HECS debt throughout the year to avoid indexation on debts they have already paid. And this was recommended by the University Accord but was left out of this legislation. This could be as simple as changing the date of indexation from the 1st of June or after the deadline of individualised tax returns. Similarly, the treatment of help debt by banks excessively impacts a person's borrowing capacity. Currently, the APRA guidance for HECS is a one-sentence long and requires HECS to be treated just the same as other types of loans, including buy now, pay later loans. This is despite the fact that HECS repayments are income-dependent, unlike other forms of credit. The Australian Banking Association has said that it would be open to considering HECS debt differently, but until prudential guidance says otherwise, their hands are tied. We need to get rid of the job-ready graduate program put in place by the former government that is inherently unfair, not to mention completely ineffective. Tempting to funnel students into certain occupations through jacking up their fees on underappreciated courses and skill sets, such as art degrees, is highly problematic. Lastly, I think we need to increase the number of courses that are covered under the prac placement. I note that psychologists are not covered under these prac placements, and with a significant shortage of psychologists and counsellors in our community right now, this is an area where the government should be moving because it makes a significant difference. And finally, we need to put in place measures, as the government has just announced this week, that ensure that education institutions are a safe place for all. Recently, I've spoken to parents who tell me their children are no longer attending university in person because of abuse and intimidation. Particularly, these are Jewish students. I've also spoken to women who have been assaulted on campus, and I was very proud to stand yesterday with the Stop campaign, who are really the people who drove the changes to the establishment of a national student ombudsman. It will help prevent violence against women on campus, but it should make a difference to many other students as well. I look forward to working with the government over the coming weeks to ensure that the new bill introduced this week contributes effectively to that objective.